And so we are now recording. Got the Brightspace. So the website. So let's do something here. All right, so let me share, first of all, the website. So I had some questions on Monday about the installation of the VM. So I added this link. So if you're still having trouble and you haven't been able to figure out how to set up your virtual machine, I added this link here. Install CVM on VirtualBox. So basically just click on that. And it's going to give you a step-by-step set of instructions on how with corresponding links, etc., to set up your operating system. Okay, guys? You can see the document here, so just go through it and set up your virtual machine. Are there any questions about this? All right, so it's number 8, okay? All right, so today is January 13th, so I still, yeah, this class is running Tuesdays and Thursdays. I may not change that, just, make sure that, because I have to change the whole thing. So just make sure you know that it's really this session. So today, we covered last week, what do system administrators do? I've already updated this video. So whenever we have a class and I generate a new video, I update it. This is still the old video, so that helps you to kind of, if you're curious as to what the topic will be about, you can go through the video, be better prepared. And on today, we're going to do a little bit of our Linux introduction, and basically, get into Linux and the virtual machine. And then I will be updating this video. Let me also, I'm going to mute your mic, some of your microphones. Okay, so that's basically the plan for today, is just to cover Linux basics, right? So getting into Linux environment. Linux is I can't stress enough how important it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me make a note, change the calendar. All right, so I'll work on that. So like I said, if you're having problems with your computer, just setting it up, please read through this document first. This should be a pretty good set of instructions on setting up your virtual machine, okay? So it should be a step-by-step, download VirtualBox, download the VM, do all the steps, follow this, new, basically, a few configurations here and there, and it shouldn't be too bad. But please read through the document, and then after that today, I'll leave it open towards the second half so that we can troubleshoot any problems you might be having. All right, so today I'm not going to lecture really, but let's switch over to Brightspace just to kind of get situated. So let's see. This is 372, so let's click on 372. All right, and here we are. So let's go to the content section. Okay, so here in the content section, we are currently on module 1, right, this week. So we've covered the slides, right, the PowerPoint slides. We've gone over that. I will set one homework assignment, probably likely to move the scripting part to next week. Okay. But today I really want to focus on this intro basically. So let's click on that, right? And so basically it says, let's see, somebody's asking me a question. Yeah, so somebody's asking me about the username and the password. The username and the password is not user and tour, it is seed and Ds. Yes, seed and Ds is the correct one for that VM that we're using, 2004. Yes, that is correct. Okay. Somebody. Yes, seed and Ds are the user and the password. If you're not able to click on something on Brightspace, okay. I mean, that's, you know, I have no control over Brightspace. So you should be able to click on this, right? This is going to be just, you can't click on this, you're saying? Is that what you're saying? Okay, you can't click. Okay, got it. Okay, don't worry about it then. I will fix it. It probably means, yeah, exactly. That's what it is. When I copied the course, all right, so this is how I do it, right? So I copy the course from the last semester. It copies the homework also, because usually I have written something in the homework. So what I will do today is I will copy this, delete this entry, add a new entry, and paste that in there. And then you'll be able to click on that. Okay, that's basically all it is. So you will see, I would still have to update this, so don't worry. So don't worry about it, okay? But I still like to have these just in case I have a document in there that I don't want to lose. Okay, yeah. So really the document in question is actually this one, the Word document, Lab Week 1, Intro 372. Okay, so this is what we will be working through today. And I realize, as you said, that it says this, but it's seed and Ds. Everything else should be consistent. So what the purpose of this lab today is really just to start typing things in Linux. So if you remember on Tuesday, I basically just went into the VM and kind of showed some of the GUI. Today, we're going to get into the terminal, and we're just going to start typing up a few commands, and I'll explain them a little bit here and there. But basically, your assignment is just to go through this, kind of, you know, type what cat is, then you're going to basically answer the question. So you have to kind of research on Google, okay, what is cat? You know, what is the uptime? What is W? You know, what are these commands? And this is a collection of commands that I have over the years found to be the most useful. Does that make sense? So that's really what you have to do. And then as we go through the semester, we will be coming back to some of these commands more specifically, right? So for instance, one important one is ifconfig, ifconfig. In Linux, this is similar to the ipconfig in Windows, right? So whenever you want to look at the internet, the network interface's IP address, for instance. Okay, so that's our goal. So, okay, so I think this is clear for everyone. So let's go ahead. And now that you have a certain sense of what we're doing, you know that our focus today is on this module 1. Now, don't worry about scripting just yet. We will get to this a little bit more later. All right, so let's take a look at, so let's now open up our virtual machine, okay? Open up virtual machine. And I'm going to start it. Okay. Let me share that. Okay, so you should be seeing the virtual machine now. Okay, so remember we are using Ubuntu 20.04 currently, as this is probably one of the more stable distros right now, distributions. So as someone asked, this is the username here is seed, and we're going to type the word D's in lowercase, D-E-E-S, right? And then we're going to log in. Once you're here, if you want to increase the screen size, you can go here. I usually go, I think, to this one. And then we're just going to wait for it to load space. Okay. If you notice, I said on Tuesday to create a folder, spring 2022. Okay. So now let's go ahead. Oh, and whenever I want to use the terminal, which is what we will be using today, I will basically click on that one. Okay. All right. So here we are. So usually whenever I get on the terminal, I have this habit that I always want to know where I am. That's the key thing. You know, because sometimes you create a file, you don't know where you are, and then you turn off the machine, and then when you come back, you can't find it. And so really, a habit I have is, okay, I always want to know where I am. I always want to be by default in the desktop also. And so things that I usually type are pwd, which tells me I am in the root directory, which is then that root directory has a home folder. And then within that home folder, I have a folder associated with my account with seed, because I'm logged in as seed. You can see that right here, right? So seed should have its own folder where seed can store its, files and so on. And so pwd is really helpful for that. I know where I am now. I also want to know what files are contained in here. So I'm going to say ls, right? And so I know, okay, I want to be on desktop. So I'm just going to navigate. CD stands for change directory. Now I can just type des. Notice that I only type DES, not the whole word. But if I click on the tab key on the keyboard, it will autocomplete. So now I hit tab and there I am. This is very handy, especially when you have long names, etc. You don't want to type them up so much. So then you can do something like this. Got it? All right, good. So, and that's basically, this is where you are, right? So this is where you are. So this is our first lab introduction. We're in the VM, and we're going to do now our Linux basics. So let's start with just a few commands. Okay. And I'm just going to follow along with the document that I posted on Brightspace. Okay. All right. So in that document, if we go back to Brightspace, I suppose, here, and then we click on the intro document, this one, we have this document, right? So I click on it, and it says basically, answer the following questions. Load your Linux Ubuntu machine, open it, in VirtualBox now with the user and password corresponding, the correct one. Check for internet connectivity. I usually just open a browser, make sure I can go to websites, and then open a terminal. Then my question is, what is the main interface for Linux? Well, usually you want to do things in a terminal. Okay, that's really important. That you can modify or work with your computer. Okay. Very handy. Let's say, for instance, I have right now I'm processing some data, right? I'm processing some data. I need a powerful computer that's a server. and that computer is not located here, it's located, somewhere else, but I still want to be able to run commands on that computer. So I can use something like a remote connection terminal, connect to the computer. By typing commands, I will be able to operate it completely. Let's see. All right, so there's some questions here. Yeah, so somebody's asking me, so if you remember what I said about the reports that you will submit, you need to provide evidence that you completed the task, not just answer the questions, okay? So that means I need to see screenshots of things working. When you do an assignment and you're supposed to write a script, write the script, but show evidence that the script actually runs. So that means you need to have a screenshot and maybe a few comments explaining what you did, okay? So your reports, you always, and I'll repeat this, for every assignment, you need to submit a report, either a Word document or a PDF. You can always start with this Word document that I already gave you and just kind of modify it from there, add your screenshots, etc. Okay? You don't need screenshots of everything, right? Like logging in or things like that are not necessary. Just simple, just, the main things like sudo, for instance. I want to know, I want you to research what sudo is a little bit and then show evidence that you typed it and that something happened. Okay? Got it? All right. Sounds like you get it. Okay, so this document, we're going to walk through it in on the VM, right? So that's our first thing. Just, this is an very easy, relaxed way. There's no like stress or anything, right? So we're on the machine. So let me share the VM. All right, so what's the first one? It says here, what is the main interface of Linux? Well, that, we're in the terminal already. Then it says, what is sudo, right? So what is sudo? So just, there's no, don't be afraid to type things in here, right? So just type something. And so here, boom, do that. So now you can see you type sudo and then the command is actually telling you that it's missing information here. So whenever you do something like this, Linux tells you usage. When you see the word usage, it is suggesting, what should follow the command. So this is the command sudo, and then there's a few flags here that you need to specify, for what you need to do. So that happens with a lot of things. If I type SSH, right, usage is telling me this is the usage of SSH. You see that? So these are the regular commands. So then you need to answer, so what is sudo? What is this sudo thing? Well, sudo is a command that will allow you to elevate the privileges of your seed account. But for that to be able to happen, seed needs to be a member of a group called the sudoers group, or the administrators, basically, AKA administrators. So those are like the super users, like the root account, that have all the privileges in the computer. You guys see that? And so whenever you want to do anything that requires privileges, let's say that, for instance, this is just an example. This is actually not a command in Linux, but let's say delete all, right? Let's say that was a command in Linux. Then do you think that you could just type delete all and have it run? No, probably that's a dangerous command. And so a regular user would not be able to run it. However, the root account could. So you would have to then log in as root and be there. However, Linux does not actually want you to do anything as root. The root account is actually, believe it or not, maybe you know this or not, it is by default disabled. Okay, so the Linux account, the root account is disabled. And so therefore, the more secure approach is that you can have many accounts that have root privileges, but they do that through being in a group. And then the account itself, whatever your name is, so Mikey, Mary, whatever, you can be an administrator as long as you're in that group. Okay. And so then, but the way to do it is, okay, let's say I'm seed and I want to run delete all, which is only a root. Let's say this is a fake program again, but so the way that I can gain the privilege is to say sudo in front of it. Do you see that? So now if I say sudo delete all, I'm saying I'm currently don't have permissions to run delete all, but I am a member of the sudoers group. And because I am a member of the sudoers group, that means that I can do things, right? I can do a lot of things. Does this make sense? All right, not all programs require sudoer privileges, however. So don't get into the mistake. I've noticed that some students get into the mistake of, you know what, I'm just going to put sudo in front of everything just because it's easier. Well, the problem when you do that is you're actually making your life harder, because what's going to end up happening is that you're going to start creating files with that sudo in front of it. And what happens to those files is that they become owned not by a regular user, but by a root account. And then what happens is whenever let's say another day, you want to access that file and you had created it as a sudo or maybe last week. Now you come in, you kind of forget and you say, I'm not going to use sudo this time. You try to access that file and you can't. And you could spend hours and hours trying to figure out why something else is not working. And it's probably a permissions issue. You know, a lot of the problems in Linux that you encounter have to do with access control, you know, these permissions issues. And so it's very important that you take this that you take your time to understand this concept, because it'll save you a lot of time later on in troubleshooting things. Now, not all programs, as I said, require sudo permissions. So for instance, the SSH command, SSH is a way that I can use to connect to other computers, right? So I can connect to other computers. So I could say something like user at, and then 190, let's say this computer, let's just say 127.0.0.1, right? And actually the account for this is what? Seed, right? So boom, do you see that? I ran the command. It's actually for those of you that have taken 350, you can see here that the computer is asking if it can send you a key, a specific cryptographic key for encryption, basically. When I hit yes here, so just type the word yes, you can see it's asking you, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Type yes, boom. I am connected to the computer. Now, is this useful? I mean, I was already connected to it, right? So I just connected to it via SSH. I'm going to type the password here. However, this works for any computer, right? So I can do this for any computer. I am currently within SSH. I'm going to exit out, and you'll see now the connection is closed, and I am back to the local machine. But the beauty of this is you can connect to actually any computer anywhere in the world. Okay, so I could have a computer, you know, in Canada, for instance, right? There's maybe a data center there, you know, cloud computing. It's a Linux computer that where I'm hosting my web server or something, and I want to go and modify, right? I want to go modify a file, etc. So there's a lot of ways. And I want to do some configuration on the terminal of it. All I have to do is type this, the user, the IP address of it anywhere in the world. Boom, I'm connected to that machine. And if you notice, the terminal that I had was exactly like the terminal of my local machine. So you almost forget, you know, you could be having a cup of coffee in your couch, or you could be on a beach, you know, anywhere. And as long as you have internet access, you know, you can do your work. So that's the beauty, especially nowadays for you guys, your generation. It's going to be more remote, more cloud-based. You know, it's very likely that that's going to be for you the reality. I mean, who knows? It's going to be even probably more remote and more cloud base than we can even imagine, right? So just because we don't know what's going to happen, but so this is certainly very important to understand. All right, so we are out of the, oops, sorry, I closed the terminal. So let me just open it again. So hopefully that made sense. Okay, so that's kind of what I did there with sudo is what I want you to do with every command. Okay, so let's just do a few more. And then I'm not going to do all of them because I kind of want you guys to start playing with it. So let's try another one, Nano. I am, Nano versus VI, right? So some of you, I'm pretty sure, know this one because I always have 2 or 3 students that know this very well. All right, I am very particular to Nano. I just like it. And this is a text editor. It's a terminal interface text editor. So the great thing about this is, again, motivating on the idea of, now notice what I'll do here also. I'm gonna use the keys in the keyboard for page up and down. So the arrow going up, the arrow going down. All right, so see? So you see what I'm doing? This allows me, this is usually called up arrow or down arrow. So I guess in the Linux lingo. And so what you do is, I'm doing up arrow here, and this allows me to kind of go back to previous commands that I have typed. So ifconfig, Ph.D. I'm looking for the SSH one, right? So I'm just like, oh, there it is. So this up arrow, down arrow of the keyboard allows me to kind of navigate through the different commands that I have typed before, and it saves a lot of time. So for instance, I was looking for SSH, right? So let's say that I'm logged into a computer and now I want to modify a file, right? So what I would do is, I'm gonna SSH into the machine. I'm gonna be in that terminal, and then remotely I'm anywhere in the world. And now I want to go ahead and change the file. So I'm going to navigate. So let's go to desktop. And I think I've created the 2022. So ITS 372. Right? I tab to complete it. I'm currently in it. Clear, ls. And now I'm in that folder. ls-l just gives me more information, but I have no files in here. However, I want to create a file. I'm just going to create some file. So what do? I type nano, right? And then I give it a name. So I'm going to say hello dot, and in this case, it's just going to be a text file, a little text file. Now, again, the great thing about this is, now there is a GUI version. I'll show it in a second, of editing files. It's called gedit. You guys, I'm sure will find it. But this, I would recommend that you practice using this a little bit. I am. So somebody's asking me if I am making a new file. I am indeed making a new file. So if you notice, the folder is currently empty. So I'm going to create the file. So notice what I'm going to do. I just typed this. I'm going to hit enter. And if you notice, the editor changed. So it gave me this white space, which is where I'm going to type my text. And then I have a few commands here of things that I can do, all terminal based. Okay, so for instance, I'm just going to say, yeah, so Nano is a text editor for the terminal, and you can create any text file that you want. As we will see next week when we start talking about the Linux way, or the Unix way, I should say, we're going to learn that the Unix way basically means that everything is a file. And that simplicity is really nice, okay, because there's really no like complications or anything about how Unix works. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to type in anything that I want in here. So usually I use this a lot for like scripting, right? So I'm going to write scripts for, usually Python scripts for just about anything. You could also use it for bash scripts. In this case, though, just because it's a simple example, I'm just going to say this is a simple text file. Okay. Oops. So this is a simple text file. So I have that in there. Now I'm going to hit, now's the key thing. So notice some things don't work. So like you can't just like click around. Notice how I'm clicking, but the cursor is not moving. On the text editor like this, you can only use the up arrow, down arrow. Some things work like copy paste, but in a specific way. It's a little bit more limited, but but the point is, when you're doing something like SSHing into another server across the internet, you still want to be able to modify files through that interface. And this is a good way of doing it. The other one is VI, but throughout the semester, I will just be using the simpler Nano. It just requires fewer commands to memorize. Okay. So now that we have, this is a simple text file, now comes the important part. You have to save this file. Now to save it, all you have to do is you look down here, and this means Control X, okay? So Control X, that stands for exiting. But when you do Control X and you exit, it's gonna ask you a few questions, okay? So again, with this editor, I recommend just practice, 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 generate a whole bunch of files and get a feel for how it works. So here I'm going to hit Control X, right, at the same time. And now it says save modified buffer. That means, do you want to save this? And so all you have to do is you can type yes, so Y. And then once you type Y, it's going to say basically file name to write. So since you had created the file with the name hello.txt, it already has the file name in there. If you don't want to modify it, just go ahead and hit enter, and boom, you're done. So now if you look, I'm going to do ls. There it is. There's my file. If I do ls-l, I have a little bit more information. Later on in the semester, we will learn, okay, what is the meaning of all these parameters? A lot of it has to do with access control. Okay. So that's basically the idea. Are there any questions before we continue? Doesn't sound like there's any questions. So let's go ahead then now and so now that I have this, let's look at the next command. So the next command is the apt install command. But before that one, actually, I'm going to show you, I have the hello.txt file. So let's say I want to view the contents of it. Linux has a lot of ways of viewing content. One, of course, is just to type nano again. Nano hello text, boom, I open it. But in this, with this command, you actually can modify the file. So I can, add something in there. Now I'm going to hit Control X, Y, enter, boom, I saved it, okay? If I do ls-l, there it is. Notice one thing that happened. This number was 31 before, now it is 33. Why? Because I added a new character, right? The exclamation point, another enter. Remember that enter, those are called new line characters. They are also characters. And so they're saved in there. So they added a little bit more data. So you basically, by doing this experiment here, you see, oh, this is probably related to the size of the file. And it is, in fact, the size of the file. Okay, I want to view this file. There's other ways of viewing it. First of all, I want to clear, the screen is getting messy now. So I want to view hello text. One thing you can do is cat, all right? So cat command allows you to view a file. So I'm going to do hello.txt, hit enter, and boom, there it is. This is a simple text file, okay? There's another command called tail. I'm just going to show this one. Hello again, I'm going to tab it, boom. And it, you can see it. This one just shows like the 10 last lines of a file. Given that this file is so short, it pretty much covers everything. But when you have a really long file, like for instance, if you have a log file, that has been logging information constantly for a week, every day at every hour, but you only want to see the most recent entries into the log, you know, tail is it's a good one. These are only for viewing. They are not for editing. Okay. Now, I did say that you do have other editors. Some are GUI based. So if you want to use a GUI based editor, just minimize this. I'm going to close the browser. And now I'm going to navigate like the Windows way, right? So I'm going to hit on this files folder. Here's my desktop. So I'm going to click on desktop. And then in here, you can see I have a few files. This is the file, the folder 2022. So I'm going to double click on that one. And there is my file. Again, if I want to modify this file, I can just right click on it and you can see open with text editor. And this is a text editor more like what you're used to, like Notepad++, probably if you've ever used that. So it's more, you know, GUI friendly, if you will, right? You can still modify things, so I can add more text here. Notice now I can click save. Notice that the name here adds a little asterisk when I modify it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now you can see the asterisk is there, but when I save it, the asterisk goes away. So that just lets you know that the file is updated. Now I can close the file system. Now I'm going to go back to the terminal. I'm going to hit clear here, and then cat, and notice that the modifications that I made on the other file are reflected here. Any questions? All right, good. So it seems like there's no questions. So that's basically the idea there. Now, if you want to install a program, you can do something like, if you want to install a program, you can do something like apt-get. You can do apt-get, right? And you can see the program there. Again, it gives you the usage. Apt-get command, it tells you how to install. This is a program that you're definitely going to need. You need it for installation of software. A lot of the time, apt-get is one of those scripts or you know, applications in Linux that require the sudo privilege. So let's say, for instance, I'm just going to think of some program to install. So let's do apt-get install, and then I'm going to say Emacs. Could not open lock file, permission denied. Okay, let's try sudo. And there you go. Do you see that? So when I added the sudo command, now it let me install something because I'm a sudoer, I'm an administrator. And now it's just saying, you know, gives me some information. You should always scan through the output of your commands. Okay, guys? Or what? Just pick another program. It doesn't have to be Emacs. Are you guys using 2004? Okay. Yeah, so
I'm using 2004.
yeah, just pick another program. It doesn't have to be Emacs. Could be what can we install? Let me just, I guess I'm going to say no here. Install. What could I want to install? I mean, there's literally so many programs and I don't know. Yeah, let's do this one. Let's just do something like Java over here. You guys have suggestions? So sudo apt-get install Java. NumPy. Python. There we go. So that's one. I mean, it's anything, right? So again, the idea is you do this and then you hit Y and it'll install the program. So, and there it goes. You guys see what it's doing? And this is kind of what it does. You should always take a look at the output that you're getting. Okay, just in case. Be careful what you install also, because that was really my concern, is I didn't want to break my installations. You know, different versions. So one thing with Linux is that a lot of programs have dependencies. Now, usually Linux is very good at resolving the dependencies, but you have to be very careful that you don't like break your programs. Okay, so that's one thing that is very important. I'm trying to think of something that we could install that's not a big deal. Now, one thing that you might want to do that I do recommend is do the following commands: sudo apt-get, or sometimes you only need to type apt as well. So you can just do, but let's do apt-get update. Okay, do this update just in case your repositories are old or something is like, you know, it needs an update basically. So this is definitely a recommendation that I would give. Okay, so run that command on your 2004. Okay, guys, a lot of the time that whenever you're having installation problems, that can actually be very helpful. Any questions? All right. So oh, here's what I was looking for. So you guys did the update, and now when you did the Emacs installation, it works. Is that what you're saying, Griffin? Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of makes sense that you were running that one, right? Sudo apt-get install Emacs, it wasn't working, but doing then the update and then now it works. So I'm glad that's, as I said, that has a tendency to fix problems. Any other issues or questions before we move forward? Okay, so I'm not hearing any questions. Let's see. Oh, here, so. So here's now a whole bunch of programs that we can install on Linux. I believe GIMP is a program for like image editing, I think. So let me close this one. Now we don't need it. I don't want to install things that we don't need. But let's just, oops. I'm gonna do clear here. And then I'm going to go back over here, apt-get install. Yeah. So I'm just going to install GIMP over here. Oops, sorry. Okay. So now if you look, again, the same thing, right? So it gives you some output. You hit Y here. Look at this always. Take a close look at what's the output is saying, and look for errors in particular. Now, don't go crazy and start installing programs on this. You actually don't want that, as you might affect the performance of your machine. Remember, it's a VM, etc. So, but this is just an example. As we go through the semester, of course, we're going to need to install certain programs. Okay. So certainly be aware of that one and just let it do this thing. Believe it or not, 10, 15 years ago, this was not the way that you installed programs on Linux. And this is, this is really the reason why Linux has been heavily adopted now, is that because before, if you wanted to install GIMP, for instance, you wouldn't start by just installing GIMP. You had to find out what all the dependencies of GIMP were, which a dependency is just the programs on top of which it is built. You had to install them, make sure you install them in the right order, okay? And basically follow that process, okay? And so now usually the editor will take care of things for us. Yes, you should always have a screenshot showing evidence that you achieve what you were supposed to do. Okay. Any other questions?
Nope, that sounds good to me, Professor.
All right, great. So again, so this is the idea, okay? In the document, if we go back to the document now, let's switch over to the Word doc. And we can see here, we have this, we've gone over what CD is, LS, clear. Now just start working through you will start working through the rest of the questions, right? Starting from 10. So, play around with date, do all this. This explains kind of how date works. So you're going to configure the date for your system. So make sure you get that right. Then you're going to play with the df command. This has to do with the partitions of the hard drive. It's going to give you how much memory has been used in the hard drive. Uname will give you information about the operating system. wget will allow you to get a website. It doesn't have to be this one. So change it. And then the rest of these have to do with performance. So uptime just means how long the computer has been on, load averages, etc. And then work your way through all these commands, okay? The ifconfig one, we'll take a look at that in a second. Create directories we've already done, and then Python, I will go over that in a sec. Chmod is an important one. This has to do with making a program executable. So for instance, I write a script, then I'm going to apply the command chmod with this permission, and that will just make it executable so that when I double click on the program, it'll run basically. And then we'll get into some of the scripting. Okay, so I'll leave the rest of this for you to complete and work your way through. And I'm just going to go over questions 18 and 19. Yeah, these are more GUI-based questions. Just show evidence that you went through DHCP. As you know, I want you to basically, with these ones, to find the network interface of the computer, and then just find like the relevant DHCP instructions. Find that DNS file in the system. Just take screenshots of it. Got it? All right, great. So I think, what was I going to, oh, Ifconfig. So let's take a look at Ifconfig. Ifconfig. So what is that? It means interface configuration. So when I type Ifconfig, I just want to know everything that I have on the computer. Usually for these machines, the interface in question is ENP0S3. Okay, so that's important that you kind of identify that one. And then because that's the interface that's connected to the internet, basically. All right. And so then you can see, okay, in terms of the VM, and then you're going to see that it's the interface 10.02.15. So this is important as it tells you what network ID you have, given that right here you have the network mask. Okay, and then so you are in the network ID 10.02, and you are, the 15 machine in that network. Okay, so Ifconfig is useful for that. And then right, and then okay, so now we are ready. So we're running well on time. Now we are ready. I think the rest of the commands I leave to you, okay? But I do want to focus in on bullet number 23, which is Python, okay? So now we're gonna go into our scripting environment. And, as I said, one of the goals of using an operating system like Linux is to be able to perform every task that you do with a great deal of automation, okay? So you want to be able to automate a lot of what you do. And so, there are various scripting languages that we can use, such as Python, Perl, Bash. They have extensions. So for instance, if you look at Python, it's got a .py extension. Perl has a .pl extension. Bash has a .sh extension. Obviously, they are like, programming languages, so they have their own syntax and everything, their own logic of how they work. Now, these are scripting languages. They are not compiled languages. So you don't have to run a compiler, compile this, blah, 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 and get the executable. That's not how it works. Instead, they are interpreted languages. And so what you need to do is you write the script, and then you run the program that, that will interpret the code, basically. So that's going to be Python for our purposes. So if the first thing I can do is I can call Python itself. Now, before I do that, because I'm going to be writing some scripts, I want to know where I am. So again, pwd, okay, I'm in my desktop, and I'm in the directory that I created. So that's good. That's where I want to be. I'm going to do ls, and I know I have that hello.txt file that I had created before. Now, do we still want to have that file in there? Not really. So I'm going to delete it. So how do I do that? I'm going to look at the permissions. It's owned by seed. I can see that here, and I'm seed, so I should be able to remove it. So if you want to remove a file, you just type rm and then the name of the file. So hello, and then tab. I hit enter. I'm going to do a clear. When I do ls-l, notice that the folder is now once again All right, so now Python, right? So I'm going to type Python over here. And, oh, right. So Python here, this is going to vary from machine to machine. For 2004, we have to type Python 3. Now, why do we have to type Python 3? It is because Python for the longest time, like for, I don't know, I guess before 2015, thereabouts, it was running on Python 2. That was really the Python version. Around that time, they developed a rewrite of a lot of it, and it created Python 3. But because a lot of people were still using, for some applications, Python 2, there was that. Newer versions of Linux, like 2004, will have Python 3. But you still kind of have this thing of, you have to know which version. So whenever you want to know the version of your Python, you can just go over here and take a look at that. So that's 3.8. That's a pretty good, pretty advanced Python environment. Okay. Okay. All right. So if you notice, I'm going to exit out of this one. So I'm just going to type exit like that, right? And I do that. So I am back. I want you to understand something. This is the terminal of your local machine. But if I type Python 3 and hit enter, notice that now we get these 3 greater than symbols. So this is a prompt, but it is now the Python prompt, okay? Not the Linux terminal prompt. This is now just Python 3. Okay. So I'm done with that. All right. So what can I do here? So this is like a command prompt where I can do Python commands. Now, this is not the way that we will always do the commands. I will usually just write a script and run that script, but I'm just showing you that you have this interface. So Python is, a language that doesn't require for you to declare variables. So I can do something like m equal 3, and that's it. So notice when I do that, now m has the value 3. If I just type m, it prints out the value. If I now do y equals m plus 2, that should be 5, right? So then I do this, and then I type y, and it is 5. Okay, so you can do basically pretty much anything that you do with Python, you can do it here. Okay, one thing that I use whenever as you guys probably know, when you took your other programming classes, we always, let's say you took C, C++, you remember that you would always include libraries, right? So you include this library, that library, header files, etc. So in Python, you do the same. Actually, that's one of the big powers of Python is the extensive library or set of libraries that it has. Also, those libraries are optimized and sometimes written in pure C, C++. So Python, in a sense, becomes like an interface to C, C++. So in a sense, it's a simplification. So instead of writing very complex code in C, C++, which it's a lot harder, you write it in Python, but it runs at the speed of C, C++. Because if you remember, C, C++ is the fastest, right? So if you want to build an intrusion detection system that runs in the network that will not slow down your network when it's looking at packets, you're going to choose C, C++. It's the fastest language, if you will. Okay. All right. So anyway, one thing that I will do is check for libraries here. So for instance, I want to know, instead of include, we use the word import, and I want to import, like, let's say a very powerful library called NumPy. I do this and I don't have it, right? That means that I have to install NumPy. You see that? That's one of the things. Now, I'll just say this as a comment. This is something that we're not going to do in the course, but there's a very powerful program called the Anaconda program. If you don't need it for this course, so we're not gonna go through it. However, I should make a little comment about it. So Anaconda, you can get that from, if you open your browser over here. Okay, and then you just go to, I think it's Anaconda, I want to say it's .org. Anaconda.com. Should have just typed Anaconda. All right, so yeah, there it is. So this is a package that is very, very useful. Although this is used for data science a lot, it can actually be used for anything. And it's a very powerful version control system. So what it does is it allows you to create virtual environments. A virtual environment is extremely important nowadays. So whenever you're in Linux, for instance, right? So you install this program, etc. Once you've installed it, whenever you're in Linux, let's say that you need to build some application, but the application needs to have specific versions, right? Specific versions for this application, and in another application, you need kind of the same programs, but different versions of it. And, because again, dependencies are extremely important in Linux. So how do you do that? Well, you would say, maybe if you didn't know about Anaconda, you would say, okay, I'm gonna install Python 3.8, but then I need Python 3.5. So then what am I gonna do? Remove 3.8 and install 3.5? Well, that's just gonna break my other programs. Do you guys see that? So that's not optimal. So what Anaconda does is it allows you to create virtual environments. Okay, so now you would do conda create virtual environment 1. And then virtual environment 2. And then once you have these environments, you can go into the environments. And then in each environment, you install the software with the versions that are specific to that task. You want to use another application, create another environment, create the versions of the software for that one, install them, and they're independent of each other. And that's really, really nice. Okay, so as I said, for this course, we don't really need to do that. So I'm not going to require it. However, if you want to explore on your own, I'd certainly recommend it. Okay. Is that clear, guys? Does that make sense? Any questions so far? All right, great. So, so now that I've talked a little bit about that, the next thing I want to do is just look at Python itself. Okay, so I'm gonna focus on that bullet number 26, the chmod, but for that I need a script, right? So let's go ahead and create our very first Python script for sysadmin. All right, this one will be very simple. I'm gonna use the Nano editor that I discussed. I'm just gonna call it hello world, right? So standard text as usual, and the extension .py. Hit that. Okay, then the key thing for this to work, and all I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna do a print statement. So I'm gonna print hello world. That's it. So notice that's pretty much all it takes to run a print statement in the scripting language. I'm gonna hit Control X, Y, enter. Now I want to run it, so I'm going to do Python 3. So Python 3, boom, there it is. It ran, and I've got my little program. However, if you notice in number 26, it says make the program executable. Okay, it says make it executable. So what does that even mean? What that means is instead of running it like okay. All right. So instead of running, it by typing Python 3 like this, I want it to run just by either double clicking it or doing, whenever you want to run an executable on the terminal, you do it like this. You type / in front of it. Okay. Now I want this to run. See, I did that. Doesn't let me. It says permission denied. It's actually confused about the error is not exactly correct. But let's take a look at, it's not doing it for some reason. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to do ls-l. I just want to know more about this file. So I look at it and okay, so this is a Python script apparently. It's owned by Seed. I'm Seed, so that's good. What else do I know? Oh, I'm going to look at this. And this tells me that if you look at the first, if you look at this little symbol, that just means that it's a file. The next three talk about the permissions of the owner. So we're the owner. So we're just going to focus on that. And it says I have read-write permissions, but I don't have executable permissions. So we haven't given it executable. If we had given it executable, there would be an X there. So we have to do that. So that's what that bullet number 26 is about. We're going to type chmod. And then later on, I'll explain the variations of this. But for now, we're just going to do +X. And then I'm going to do hello world like that, if you see that. Okay. So now I'm going to change the permissions. Notice when I do this, it worked because there's no errors. Now I'm going to run ls-l again, and I'm going to compare this line to this line over here. Okay, guys? So what's the difference? There's two differences. First, this is now highlighted in green. That's an indication by the terminal that something has been made into an executable program. Another way to convince yourself is by looking at the permissions here. If you notice, all the permissions now have been changed from these little dashes to X's. See that? X, X, X. Basically, what that means that everybody that comes across this program can now execute it. We were very relaxed in this command, and so we just ended up giving everyone permission to run it as an executable. Questions?
Okay, so I have a really quick question. So when I was, why is there an echo?
I don't know. You might have two microphones somehow open.
Oh no.
Click one of them. So error when I ran the code, but it did run the right way. Yeah, I'm not understanding your, oh, okay. So your question was a typo. Okay, gotcha. Anything else, guys? All right, so now the proof of this though is that we're gonna run this command over here, right? So I'm gonna go over here, and now it's pretending to be executable. So not pretending, but it says it's executable. So now I'm gonna run this command, and it's giving me an error. Do you guys see that? Now, the reason why it gives this error is that it is running an executable, but it doesn't know how to interpret the text. By default, I think bash is actually the interpreter. So we have to tell it in the program that this is Python. And so the way to do that is we're going to go back with Nano to our script. And up here, we just have to add a little line like this, # exclamation at the very top. And we're going to say user bin Python. And it's probably Python 3, I would say. So now this will tell the shell, the bash, that whenever we run the program, that it should be interpreted with Python 3. So now let's go ahead and try that one. We don't have to update the permissions are already updated, so we don't have to do that. And there it is. Any questions? No questions? Okay, great. So that it sounds like that made sense to you guys. So now we are, that's some of the basic stuff. Now let's just do an actual little script. Okay, so we'll be between you know, now and next week, I'll just be doing simple Python scripts just to get everyone kind of practicing with it. My suggestion is practice these at home, okay? Practice these at home. So let's see, if we go back to our Word document, let's go over here. Brightspace. So we've, you know, you have to complete the rest of the commands up until 26, right? Although I've done a lot of them. Now we're going to focus on questions 27 to 30. Basically, I'm just going to write some very basic Python scripts. First, I'm just going to introduce like the basic things like if, for loops and all that. And then after that, we're going to do sysart script, view contents of password file script, directory listing script, and system information gathering script. At the end, I will assign one problem for you to solve, which is usually something like problem, like bullet 30. Okay, you will have to write this script on your own. Okay, guys? So you will be, that will be yours to write, basically. Okay, so, but let's do a couple of scripts, and then after that, I will let you guys. So for this week, you will not work on these, okay? You will not work on 27 through 31. You are only responsible to work through 1 through 26, okay? Next week, we will focus on these scripts, but today, what I'm gonna do now, it's not homework. I'm just gonna introduce a little bit more of Python scripts just to get you more comfortable with it, basically. That's really the plan. And please stop me if you have any questions. So really when you're, you know, we should look at Python loops, reading files, if statements, you know, the basic stuff that you've learned in other programming classes. If you've taken 140, I'm pretty sure they've already introduced you to Python in that course as well. Let me just check my notes here that I've covered everything. All right, so we will kind of conclude today with just going through some Python scripts to get familiar with it. All right, so let's go back to the virtual machine. There it is. Okay, so now we are here, ls-l, we did our hello world script. Let's just now, I'm going to use Nano again. And what else can we do? Let's do a simple if statement, okay? Just a simple, very simple if statement. So if statements.py, I'm going to go in here and, you know, what is an if statement? So I'm going to also show you that whenever you use Python, you can bring it, the power of Python is all the libraries. So let's say you want to bring in a library. I'm going to do import sys. We'll be using this one, given that we are writing scripts basically with the goal of automating sysadmin of Linux, right? So that means, we want to automate things that we would do on the operating system, like calling the system itself, right? So we have a couple of libraries. One is system, the other one is OS. These are built-in default libraries of Python, so they're just there for us to use. So for now, I'm just kind of throwing them in there. Later on, we will come back to them. All right, so let's do a simple if statement. So if, just to remind you of the syntax. Not here. So I'm getting a question. Do I need to put in user bin Python 3? Remember, you only need that if you're gonna make your program executable. So if I'm not making it executable, I don't need it. I'll just run it by calling Python 3 and then the name of the file. However, if you want to have that option of making everything executable, go ahead and just add the Python, the user bin Python 3 statement at the top. Does that make sense, guys? Another thing that I want to say is comments, right? So you guys learn in your programming courses that good coders comment their code, right? So I like to add lines like this to separate sections. That's a comment. So you only need one £. So this is a comment. Oops, sorry. This is a comment. Okay, so everything in red there will be interpreted as a comment, and you can write whatever you want. So now let's say if A equal Linux colon. Notice two things that are really important when you do Python. You use these colons whenever you use a for loop or an if statement. And then the other key thing is indentation has to be done very well. So what that means is now, usually in like C, C++, you would do something like this in JavaScript, right? Curly brackets. We don't use that in Python, and instead we use indentation. So to start the indentation, we just add spaces. So it can be 1, 2. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Some people use tabs, and it's a preference. However, the only thing that I do not recommend that you do is mix tabs with spaces. So decide if you want to use spaces or if you want to use tabs. I like spaces. Some people just do 2, 1, 2. Some people do 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I prefer 4 because it makes the code more readable for me. But that, again, is a preference. So I will be using 4 spaces for the indentation. So in this case, I'm going to do if A equal Linux, right? Then I'm going to print Ubuntu. Else, print, and you can say here, don't know. And we can add more options even. We can say if, which is else if, and you have to put in the condition. So if A equal Windows, right? Then colon 1, 2, 3, 4, print, version 10. Windows 10. Okay, so that's kind of how, just a simple example of how to use if statements. I'm going to obviously initialize the variable A, and I'm going to say it is Mac, right? So then let's see, we're going to run this code and see how it works. So I'm going to do Control X, Y, enter. And I'm going to do Python here. And oh yeah, I keep forgetting. I just use so many versions of this, and in other versions, I don't have to type this. And there you go. Don't know, right? Because I said Mac. Now I'm going to go ahead and change is to Windows, notice that I didn't have to initialize or declare data types here. So this is similar. If you ever use JavaScript, you know, that's also similar and consistent. All right, so I'm going to do A equal Windows. So now it should say version 10. Clear. And it is version 10. Is that clear for everyone, guys? Are there any questions on this? Okay, so it doesn't sound, so I definitely recommend that you follow along and you make sure that you know how this works, okay? Let's do now for loops, you know, another common thing. Again, I'm just kind of, you know, very informally showing you how this works. So let's now create, you know, I'm going to do clear. So I'm going to do a clear here. ls-l. And I'm going to create another script. Nano, call this one, you know, for loops. .py. And again, so, you know, how do you write a for loop in Python? You can just basically type the word for. Now it's a little bit different because everything is an object in Python. And also another convenience of Python is that Python really just has two data structures, the dictionary and the list, okay, by default. So everything is a list, like every array is really a list. And so that's kind of handy. So we treat everything as a list. So the intuition here is, let's say I'm going to create a list. List 1, okay? And so list 1, you just need the square brackets, and then I'm going to just say A, oops, sorry, A, B, C, D, right? So I created a list. It's got 4 values in it. So that's like saying an array of 4 where these are the values. Now this list, I'm going to iterate through it. So I'm going to do for, and I need an object to every time I iterate through this list, I need to grab the object. So I need a variable for that. So let's say element in list 1. You see that? It's kind of very intuitive that way. So I'm just going to say for element in list 1, and then now comes the indentation. Remember, instead of the curly brackets like in C, C++ or JavaScript, you're going to use indentation. So my preference usually is to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and everything has to be aligned here. So now I'm going to say print, and this is a text that I'm adding, element value, and then I'm going to actually print the element value. So I'm going to say print element like that. Okay, guys, so I'm going to, that's it. Notice that these are perfectly aligned. Then once I'm out of the for loop, I'm going to add a line, align with the for loop, print, for instance, done. Just like that. Okay, and so that's what I'm going to do. So this should print out all the element values. So I'm going to do Control X, Y. Again, now I'm going to add Python 3 in front over here. Python. And notice there it is. It's printing A, B, C, D. Okay, so that's really the idea for you to understand. Now let's modify that code. And let's add another one. So now, let's say that you want to now iterate through a range of values. Then what do? Then you can do for I in, and now you actually specify range. Why? Because range is a function that will return basically a list. So then you're going to end up doing the same thing. You're going to iterate through that list, but you don't define the list. You just define the function that creates the list. So in this case, range. So for instance, if I say range 10, questions? So if I just say range 10, I'm just going to have 10 values in my list. So I do colon 1, 2, 3, 4, print I. Okay. So now if you look, Control X, Y. Python 3 for loops. And there it is. Now I was able to print out all of my values. All right, great. So again, this is just a quick introduction to what we're going to do today. So let me now, in the time that we have left, yes, so I'll go back to the code in a second. There it is. All right, so now in the 10 minutes that we have left, let's talk about the homework assignment. So I'm going to close this one now. Clear, right? I'm going to switch back to Brightspace. Okay, and then, you know, what I want you to complete. So I'm going to, let me download this file. Okay. So now, all right, so I'm going to create on Brightspace here. You guys should be seeing Brightspace. All right, so now let's go to table of contents. Okay, you can see here, I'm going to look at this one, intro scripting examples, complete 27 through 29 of the attached handout as shown in class. So this will do next week. Okay, so this will be done next week. So I'm just going to remove it from here. And I'll make it available next week. Since you guys couldn't click on that. Now, this is the homework that you will be responsible for from the attached Word document, complete problems 1 through 26. Submit a report with screenshots of each problem and answer the questions, right? So that's what I had said. Copy that. I'm going to delete this one, given that it copied last year's. Okay, so now if we go to the table of contents, you can see under intro, we have this week, we have covered the slides, what do system administrators do, and then you're going to have your assignment. So I'm going to create it now, new assignment. Just going to call it Linux intro. Linux intro homework. Okay, this is worth 100 points. It's gonna be due, so today's the 13th, so it'll be due on the 20th by 10 p.m. but it'll stay open until the 22nd. Oh, sorry, no, this is wrong. So it opens now, and it'll stay open until the 22nd. That's how it is. And then let me just add that text. So from the attached Word document, complete problems 1 through 26. Submit a report with screenshots for each problem and answer the questions. Okay, so for each problem and answer the questions here. So now I'm going to click on save. Yeah, so that's your assignment. And let me just, since this is the document, I'm going to update it right now. So let me now share the Word document. Okay, so this is the Word document that you're going to be responsible for. So turn in a copy, answer all the questions. We're going to change this to C and D's. And basically you're responsible for all of this until 26. So I'm just going to remove these from here, and they're going to be in the next report. Yes, any old assignments. This is the first time that I've always done the copy course the same way, but this is the first time that it actually copied the homeworks. I don't know why, so I will have to remove them manually. Okay. Yeah, so don't worry about that. All right, and so now I've updated this file, so I'm just going to load it on here. This should be a more current version. Okay. And there it is. Okay, guys, so for this week, go back to table of contents. I've updated the file, so therefore now you have your new assignment, right? And then here's the document updated with only the relevant things that you need to work on. Okay, is this clear? All right, for next week, let me just do the other part. So let me just add the other document. So the document is there now, the assignment. I'm going to close this one. And now scripting, what we will be working on next week, basically, I will add the other file. So let me open that. Share that document now. And the same thing, right? So for this one, but I will probably modify this a little bit next week. But for now, basically, you'll have some scripts. Okay, so but that's going to be next week, so don't worry about it. I'm just updating the file on Brightspace. So let me share the Brightspace environment. And on here now, I'm going to add that file. this. Loading. And so far, this is what we have. But as I said, once we get into next week and we start going through, we'll develop this a little bit more. All right, so that's it. What's the crying for? All right, so that's basically it for today. So hopefully this makes sense. Okay. So anything related to scripting has been moved to next week. I will provide more scripting examples next week. And homework related to that. Today, I just introduced some of the basics of scripting, but no homework related to that. And instead, I just want you to focus, as I said, on the Linux commands, of which we have discussed many today. At the end of the day, I just want you to practice as much as you can. Okay, and that's it. That's it. So I'm gonna stop the recording now, and I'll stay for a few minutes if you have any questions. Let me stop the recording.